talk last week about the meditation posture. I went into some details from Rinpoche, and I wondered if we could just, with each of you, have a little reminder. And so I just want to go around, whatever you remembered is fine. Some of you are more versed in this, some not. Please come in. And so what I'd like you to do is just go around the room one by one. And I just want each of you to add something to the meditation posture. That 7-point Vairocana posture, or Vairocana. What do you remember about that posture? So we're going to begin by putting ourselves into this posture.
Okay.
What comes to mind?
The spine.
Okay, the spine. And the way Rinpoche described was, I believe I sent that off to you, didn't I, Anapala, of the piece of the thing. He mentioned the waist. He said like the waist is elongated, meaning the spine would be elongated, expanded, as if the back is straight. Okay, so that's one part of the position, yep. What else do you remember?
The arms farther away. The arm farther away from your body.
Yeah, the arms, and how do you hold the hands?
I don't remember the name of this position.
Okay, and also they point up like a little triangle.
Yes.
Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
They point up like a triangle with the right palm face up on the left. And again, it's right below the level of the navel, right against the body. So as that comes against the body, then what happens is the arms are out like wings. Okay? What else do you remember?
Chin being up, a little downward.
Down.
It's a little bit position of the head. So the head a little bit tipped forward. Okay, subdued posture. That's 3. We've got 3 of the 7.
The tongue.
Somebody different. Somebody else.
The tongue touching your upper palate.
Yes. So jaw and lips can be lightly together, and the tongue, exactly, touching right behind the teeth, the upper palate, and the mouth. That's 4.
The eyes.
The eyes are
slightly open. Let's say.
can be slightly open. And where are they pointed? What are they focused on?
Downward.
That's right. Down in front of you, tip of the nose, or the floor in the space in front of you. That's number 5.
Mm-hmm. The legs.
The legs, thank you. The legs is actually the first part of the posture. So the legs is number 1. Position of the legs is like what?
Vajra.
Yeah.
Lotus, if you can.
Lotus, half lotus, some sort of stabilizing position. And in a chair, you want your legs straight down so the body is balanced. And the last thing, anybody remember?
Mouth.
Shoulders.
Shoulders. So shoulders relax, not up by the ears, but relax. And I even think some of you do yoga, I'm sure you have the backbones are headed down the back. Those shoulder blades headed down the back. So again, it's an upright, erect posture. And technically you would focus on the legs and then position of the hands, checking the spine, head, shoulders, and then, let's see, I think mouth and tongue, and I'm forgetting one now. What would be legs? It would be probably the arms sticking out like that. 7-point Vairocana posture. 7-point Vairocana. So let's just check your posture again. Okay, now, and please forgive me, the gentleman in the back row, I forget your name.
Francesco.
Yes, I remember seeing you both at Light of the Path. So again, I'm going to correct you to let your hands up. They're going to be at the level of the navel. Yes, so the arms actually stick out like wings.
Yeah.
And it's a little uncomfortable at first because we're not used to that, holding the arms up. But you will become, when you practice it, it does set the body in a good posture. Keeping the mind more alert is what Rinpoche says. And just taking a deep breath, just allow every exhalation now to allow you to go more inward. And as you inhale, finding comfort in the position. As you exhale, letting distraction go. Allowing you to be more in meditation. To be more in meditation. And I'm just checking, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And in this posture, allow your mind now to settle on the breath. Just bringing yourself here into the space. And let's consider why we are together this evening. And it could be why we are together this evening. It can also be what best sets us up in our day right now. What makes the most meaning of our day? So here we are going through our day. For a lot of us, we are nearing the end of our day. And there is never a problem to take the time to consider our purpose for what we are doing. And to best direct our mind and our awareness towards something positive by setting a good motivation. So reflect for a moment on your reason for being here. And considering you may get some information this evening that may benefit your mind. If it helps you be clearer, happier, more peaceful. Perhaps that's something that will benefit you and your family, in your community, in your workspace. May it also benefit us in our practice, so we can progress along a path to becoming Buddhas, fully awakened beings, a Buddha, because then we're unlimited in benefiting all living beings. To benefit all living beings. So just consider that motivation that is aligned with Tibetan Buddhism. If you'd like, you can roll that into your own motivation, your own purpose for being here right now. And take a moment to set a good motivation for this time we have together and all the activities of the rest of your day. And let's move to the 9-round breathing, which is a way of clearing out negative energy from the more subtle energy system in your body and mind. You can begin by closing off your left nostril if you like. We breathe in through the right nostril. And imagine as you exhale, close off the right nostril. Exhale deeply through the left. Imagine you're clearing out anger and hatred. We'll do that 3 times. Breathing in through the right, out through the left. The second round, we are closing off the right nostril, breathing in deeply through the left. As you exhale, close off the left nostril, exhale deeply through the right nostril, and imagine you are lessening attachment and desire in your mind 3 times. The last round, we are breathing in through both nostrils, exhaling through both nostrils, releasing confusion and ignorance from our mind 3 times. Focusing the mind now on the breath itself. So you're focusing on the air as it moves in and out of the nostrils, or the space just outside the nostrils. Keeping your concentration there. And if you'd like, you can count the breaths. 1 inhalation, 1 exhalation is 1. See how far you can count before the mind wanders. Again, if your mind wanders, it's perfectly normal. Just observe that you're off the breath and simply bring your mind back to the breath and begin counting at 1. Please relax. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. I just want to, if it's okay, to have a little show and tell. When I was at Light of the Path retreat with some of you, which was wonderful to be there with you, the Rinpoche, I had a meeting with Rinpoche, and he gave me a print of a tanka that I believe was painted by Jane Seidlitz, who lives in Massachusetts. She was at the retreat. She's a great artist. And she's an old friend. And Rinpoche's given me pictures before, and people have given me pictures. And because I'm living in my father's house, I'm not, I didn't want to change his house too much. And the thing is, I don't really have a lot of money to get pictures framed, because you know how expensive that is, right? So, and then when you're moving, it's a lot more to move. So I kind of haven't done that. But somehow when I got this print, which is a Palden Lamo. Palden Lamo is a female deity, and she's the protector of Tibet. So she's a little bit fierce looking, but she's a very special deity. And I somehow, Rinpoche had written on the back of this and put all the blessings on it, and I just somehow got moved to frame it. And which normally I don't do. So I learned in Vermont, when we didn't have a lot of money at the center, people gave us beautiful pictures that if you can go to a cheap store and buy a cheap frame, right? A frame that looks nice, but it doesn't cost much. And then we had a friend in Vermont who, I got friendly with a woman at a frame store, and she would help me pick out a mat for it, and we put it together. So I found a woman here that I got friendly with at this beautiful frame store, little frame store in the next town. Lovely woman. And we went, so I got the frame, and I went over to her place, and we were debating with the pictures, with the color of the picture, a red mat or a blue mat. Anyway, we selected blue, and this is what we got. I will show you. And I'll put the picture on its.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Can you see?
Yes.
Anyway, it turned out, it is so amazing. In fact, when we put it in the frame, both of us kind of went, whoa! Like it just came out so, it looks so expensive, it looks so, and it was like $25. Can you imagine?
Wow.
The whole thing. Like, it was just amazing. It was like $25, $30. I couldn't believe. And she said to me, if I did this myself with the frames, it would have been $100. It's just so beautiful, but it came out so beautiful. And the blue was clearly the picture, the color to go with.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the red would have been a little bit too alarming, I think. And so I'm very happy to have the protection.
Nice.
It looks beautiful.
This one, Rip had given me that a long time ago, that white Tara, like that.
Nice.
Anyway, a little show and tell. Okay. I just got that back. That's why I was very happy to share that with you. Okay. So one of the things that's helpful in this class, and I know some of you are doing it, I know some of you may not have gotten to this, that's okay, I understand, is a little bit of this meditation practice alongside. So again, you set up your physical posture, you set up your mental posture. I always repeat this because for me it's the most important thing, is that motivation. Your mental posture is your motivation, your attitude. Please try to incorporate that into everything you do every day, from whether you remember getting out of bed in the morning, whether you forgot but you remembered in the shower, or you're brushing your teeth, you're having your coffee, you're driving your kids to school, that all of a sudden it's like, oh yes, where's my mind? Oh, I'd like to get my mind in a good position. And that means considering all beings, considering how I can help all beings. That's the crux, that's the core of this particular tradition of Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism. So the motivation is just one of the biggest parts of the path, is getting the motivation set for whatever activity I'm about to undertake. So I can't say enough about that. And then if you have time in your own personal practice, setting up a physical posture, setting up a mental posture, going to the 9-round breathing, and then a little bit of focus on the breath. And you can do counting the breath. There's various ways of counting the breath. Really nice way to start establishing a consistent meditation practice. Just as a question, and if anyone would like to comment or has questions or frustrations or suggestions, how's that going for you? How's that establishing some consistency in it, in just a little sitting practice? Anybody care to say?
Go for it. For me, it's wavy. It's like the wave. Sometimes I'm consistent. Most of the times, most of the days, I have a motivation. Always, my frustrations and a motivation and a sitting quickly. Most of the days. As far as practice, more advanced practice, it's like that. It's like that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I close it up usually also with a dedication. Also, sometimes faster than other days, but yeah, that's me.
Great. Wonderful. So here's something I want to interject about when you said advanced practice. Okay, so let's also be kind with ourselves or realistic. We have some idea about advanced practice or something else we're supposed to be doing, but a lot of this is about watching your mind, like being able to more adequately watch my mind, and then anytime I can remember emptiness, even more fantastic. So when we talk about advanced practice, that's really where we're advancing to. Is if I can be driving my kids to school and I just kind of remember this interrelational aspect of everything, and that the only way things can exist is due to this interdependence, and that if you just start playing with that in between a formal meditation session, to me that's quite advanced. You know, that's anytime you want to remind yourself. So don't be too hard on yourself about I should be doing this, I should be doing that. It's, if you're watching your mind, it's a huge part of practice.
That I do.
You know, anytime you pour on the good heart, and you can suddenly stop yourself and consider, like somehow today I went out and, let's see, I had a minor doctor's office thing, very minor thing, and then went to see my father, and had some interactions with some people there, and there was one other thing I can't remember, something else I did, and I you know, some days you feel kinder than other days, right? Does anybody have that? Some days?
Yes.
And today I was really focused on the kindness. Like somehow I was really with myself with the kindness more than some other days when I'm more focused on me. You know, I was really focused on, so again, it doesn't happen for me every day. But today I noticed, I thought, some nice space, and so give yourself credit for that. That's a nice place when, because other days, you know, it doesn't happen. And then on those other days, if I'm not in that space, I also make sure, and this is a key part, I make sure that I'm not going to be hard on myself, that I wasn't so spacious today. It's a key part of, you have to be compassionate with yourself. You know, if I want to be compassionate with others, I have to practice self-compassion. So, very much meaning, okay, today I wasn't all that happy today. I was impatient. And that's the best I could do today.
Mm-hmm.
But tomorrow, I have another chance. I hope I have another chance tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
I think what I meant was more of a sitting practice that is not, but
Yeah.
advancing in my mindfulness, in my awareness, in the watching my mind throughout the days, that I think, I've been better, definitely. So I can see myself watching my mind like a hawk sometimes, so it was,
Great.
I was,
Yeah.
saying more of a sitting practice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
So,
Yes, no, I know what you mean. It's like when I'm formally sitting versus, yep.
yes.
Okay, no problem. That sounds great. Anybody, other people? Other comments? Things happening?
I have a daily practice as well in the morning and in the evening. I do the best I can, but I always show up. So that's very good for me and for my mind. And so it's the first thing I do in the morning. And so 3 prostrations,
Great.
my water bowls, and then the motivation and some daily prayers that you mentioned back in the day that is good to do, that are good to do.
Yep.
And as far as breathing meditation, I do not do it every day. I try. Some days I do it. Some days I'm more inclined to that. Some days I'm more inclined to prayers or mantras. Mm-hmm. It depends. So yes, and breathing per se is hard for me to focus, because my mind goes away and bring it back and goes away and bring it back. But I try. At least I try.
Right.
5 minutes, not more than 5 minutes.
Right.
So and in the evening I try to do a practice as well, and then during the day try to watch my mind also as much as possible and have a motivation. So I'm happy. I'm yes.
Great.
I do the best I can. That I know.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes, because also what's really nice, what I hear from both of you, it sounds like and I'm sure others also in the room, the habit.
Yes.
The habit you have, like when you just said, every morning and so you get into this habits, and some people, as we know, have habits. You've got to have the coffee in the morning.
Mm.
I had a habit here for a long time living with my father. He used to get the newspaper delivered in the morning. So one of my habits I noticed was I was reading the newspaper. And one of the things, there's no problem reading the newspaper. I like to read the newspaper sometimes, but I also noticed it was taking up a bit of the day to do, and I thought, well, I could just be doing something else at this point. I don't need to have that much news of so just looking at the habits of, that I get up and I sit and I put out my water bowls and I say some prayers and I do some prostrations, and everyone has their own habits with their practice. Yeah. And sometimes after a while you may choose to expand some of the practices. Mm-hmm. Or if you're not going to do it every day, you might have a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you do certain prayers or certain things in the practice, and then a Tuesday, Thursday, some other thing, I can do these other things, just to compromise, because we all have busy lives like that, especially if you have families. And so that it's nice to have that habit. It really, and then you notice that because it's a habit, it happens most days.
Yes.
If it doesn't, you feel kind of naked, right?
Yes.
Something's missing in the day like that.
You miss
So that's very powerful.
Yeah. The weekends that I don't have to wake up at a certain time, and I don't wake up earlier to do my practices during the week, so I do it later, but then maybe I have breakfast first and then I do my practice, and it's weird, not to do it the first thing I do, no? But well, it's fine, as long as I show up, it's good.
It's a great phrase that you show up. I mean, that's a really nice thing. If I show up, like a lot of times I think I'm showing up with my mind too. Like I'll notice my mind going through its stunts, the different activities. And but a lot of times I'm along for the ride. I'm not unconscious in something. Like I might notice anger arising in my mind, and I'm not just ignorantly, unconsciously letting the anger go. Like I'm kind of watching and thinking, okay, what's really making me angry right now? What can I do about this? How can I make sure I don't respond from that place? What's causing this? So that's really showing up, and you can show up formally on your cushion, and then you can show up. I think that informs you showing up through the day. And also on the weekend, I do find there's nothing wrong for busy people where you alter things. For some people, and you notice that it does feel strange, so it motivates me on Monday again to make sure that I'm there in my practice. Like that. Anyone else, other people have any comments or things that it's challenging, I'm not getting on my cushion, how do I do it? Any other comments that things are working, things are not working?
Well, for me, this is all very new. I just
Now,
started.
I can't see, so
Oh.
is there a way to turn the camera just
No,
no.
maybe?
Do you want to
Can
see?
you see me here? Yeah?
Okay,
No?
see half of you,
Yes?
okay.
Okay.
Oh, there
Here.
you are, oh, great.
Right.
Just so I can get a context of
Yeah.
yeah, not to see you, great.
So for me, this is all very new. I started reading your book. I've done some research. I approached this religion very recently, so this workshop has been very interesting. And I'm just learning about all this, but a lot of it is very foreign. Like when she says she wakes up and she sets up her water bowls, I have no idea what she's talking about.
Right.
Or I don't know, many other things that I then get home and I start doing research and saying, what is this about, right? So for me, I have, since I approached this, I kind of have changed the way I think about many things. And I think I have noticed a change in me, and my family has noticed a change too, being more aware of myself and being more grounded, which is very nice. But in terms of setting up like a daily practice or meditating regularly or prayers, I really don't know where to start, to be honest.
Okay, so, and is it Andrea?
It's Violeta. My second name is Andrea, actually, so it works.
Violeta, sorry. So I've got Violeta, Francisco, and Francisco next to you is
Alessandra.
Alejandra. Okay, I got it. Just check, these are the people I can see. Okay. So
Just
Violeta,
since I'm sorry, but
absolutely.
since I love my Italian name, is not Francisco but Francesco.
Oh, I'm sorry, Francesco. It's a beautiful name. Francesco.
Sorry, just
Okay. So Violeta, absolutely no problem at all, because when we're new, we're all at different levels. And when we're new, you have to slowly put the layers on, and the exciting thing is, if you talk to Ana Paula, if you talk to Maria sitting in front of you, how many years now, ladies, you've been involved?
4.
4 years, okay. So for me, I might say, and I don't mean to put, weights on this. For 4 years, I might say, oh, that's not such a long time.
No.
But in 4 years, I feel like you both have made leaps and bounds. You never know what level people come in at, what imprints they already have. So in 4 years, I feel like some people have made a lot of progress. And it's interesting because you look 4 years back and you think, wow, I really didn't know anything. Mm-hmm. I mean, I found this thing and I was completely clueless. And so again, you're going to build on where you are, Violeta. So fantastic, you do research and you check up. I think it's very healthy to check up. And again, we don't want to get into comparing ourselves. Everybody has their own path. And you're building a beautiful community there. So you start with where you are. And then slowly, if you say, she says, oh, water bowls. You say, what are water bowls? And then maybe you ask somebody in the group, what are the water bowls? What are these things you set up? Can you point me in a direction of how I do it? Can I watch you do it sometime? Can you show me? You know, and that's something we do. Sometimes you might want to have a tutorial at the group and you have a little hour session where people set up water bowls. Oops, my phone is running out of charge. Okay, hang on 1 second. I'm just going to plug it in.
As a matter of fact, I just learned how to make water bowls.
Oh, yes. And there's a reason why you do that?
No,
and it's
I
for your
imagine.
mind.
I imagine.
And
Yeah, of
everything
course.
is for your mind.
Yeah.
So, but Alexandra is great.
And
If you want
I
to
got
learn.
I have a little booklet from Namdrol and
Oh, now I see all of you. Somehow I had this turned the wrong way. Okay, now I see everybody.
I can copy.
Okay, well, you can tell me,
Thank you.
trying to see if I can
Scan it and send it to you later.
turn it this way. Okay, here we go.
Oh, whoops.
Sorry, I'm a little video. I'm having a little trouble here getting it set up. Okay, I don't have a place to really put this, so. Oops. Hold on a second. Okay. Let's see. Are you able to see me like that? Is that? Oh, no.
It's easier with the water bowl.
Okay. Because I have to charge my phone, so I don't have anything to lean it on. Let's see. Let me try that. No. Okay. All right, this might be a problem. I don't know where else to put the phone. Can you see?
Yes,
Yes. There you
Perfect.
go.
Is it too close?
No.
No.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So, what I was going to say, Violetta, is you just keep going. You know, if there's something you like, fantastic. If something that doesn't work for you, put it to the side, and then slowly you can revisit. You know, when something makes sense. The main thing you might find is, and each of you has to find your path, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a Buddhist path. So, you want to you start doing a little something, you get stressed and you start following your breath and you realize it calms you down, then for me it would be a natural thing to want to return to my breath when I get stressed. You know, it's like you're trying techniques, something works for you and is very supportive, then that's something I'm going to gravitate back to. And that's really the path. So I think no problem to say, this isn't resonating, I'm not doing this. When you're new, just slowly, you start wading into the water. And then you start to see where you want to swim. Mm-hmm. So that's perfectly normal. So I would just say, continue to attend what you'd like and read and research, and things will start to unfold as well. And you've got some nice people in the group, you can ask questions and like that. So I would definitely use them as a resource and also talk with them about the unfolding of their own path, because it's been pretty exciting for me as long as I've known some of the people in the group like that. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Super. So slowly, and then regarding one thing Maria said, if you don't have the time to do the focus on the breath is one of the most basic meditations. And that's why I started with it, because I do know people in this room are at different levels. So the other thing about the breath is it's a type of shine meditation. Shine is a Tibetan word for calm abiding. Calm abiding. So, and that's our basic meditation where you're trying to keep your mind focused on one object, keeping it focused with concentration. So it's one of our fundamental meditations, and the breath is just one object you can use. And some of you that have been in some retreats with me, you can use different objects and try, like, can I focus on an apple? And you're not looking at the apple, but you're clear what an apple looks like. And then you close your eyes and you bring the apple into your mind and keep your concentration there. So that's why the counting the breath or just focusing on the breath a little bit starts to set up the foundation for you to practice calm abiding, to build concentration. So that's why this course happens to talk with some of the fundamentals like that, which I think is just super. So moving on, what I want to talk about is the mind in Tibetan Buddhism, and I know some of you are more familiar with this, but let me just give you the rollout of how we think of mind in Tibetan Buddhist system. The mind, which I'm going to equate to with consciousness, mind and consciousness are the same, just different terms. Okay? The mind in Tibetan Buddhism is seen as having no beginning and no end. It's a continuum. And it is a continuum of thoughts, ideas, experiences, memories, feelings, and they'll even be more specific of what that is made of are moments of consciousness, moments of mind. So they do not have any physical form. The mind is not physical, and it has no shape, no color, nothing you can't cut open the body and look into a microscope and say there's the mind, because it is not physical. It's immaterial. And this is what's very hard for us to conceive of. You know, we are linear thinkers, that something started on this day and ends at this day. We know this class starts at 7:30 and it ends at 9:30?
Yes.
Or 9 o'clock?
9:30.
9:30, right. So you have a beginning, you have an end. The beginning of the year is usually January for most people. The end of the year is December. And practically we have to engage that way with our reality. So how does the mind fit in that has no beginning or end? It leaves us too loose and very difficult for Westerners to conceive of that, and that it has no shape or form or color or anything that I can see or hold in my hand. So this is kind of unsettling for us about the mind. Okay. But slowly we make our way. So what we notice is if you have a where you notice, one of the things I notice is imprints I've gotten of why, if some of you have siblings and some of you have more than one child and the children are very different, correct?
Yes.
Your kids are pretty different. You and your siblings are pretty different. Okay? So it's interesting, if you're born to the same parents with this pretty much similar circumstance, how do we end up being so different? And sometimes the only thing that it comes to me is I have different impressions in my mind, in my consciousness. Okay? So Buddhism also talks about the continuity of the consciousness. The continuity of the consciousness. What does that mean? If the mind has no beginning or no end, there's a continuity that indicates past lives and future lives. So reincarnation. Now that's hard for a lot of people, but let's think about it. Let's break it down into some context we can understand. Okay, so I've done this with you before, and we've done some meditations like this a long time ago or in different retreats or things like that. Okay, one of them, there is a meditation called the continuity of consciousness. And these meditations are available through the Discovering Buddhism course on the mind, which is the first module, Mind and Its Potential. It's a fantastic module, Discovering Buddhism. Mind and Its Potential. So, what I wanted to mention, if you look up those meditations, they're easily downloadable, and you can, there we go. You can print them out, or you can just keep it on your computer. And the continuity of consciousness involves each of you in this room right now, when you got into the seat in the room,
I have to go, Venerable, I'm sorry.
no problem.
Bye.
Bye-bye. When you got into your seat, you first stood at the doorway, and I'm familiar with the room that you're in. So, this is your small room, correct?
Yes.
Behind the house? Yes. Okay, so I know that room quite well. Okay, and I know where the door is. So when you come through that door, I want you to just trace for a moment how you got to your seat. So for instance, you stood at the doorway, and you had moments which you were going to call thoughts that come from your brain, okay? And they take in the information of the room. Okay, here's the seats, there's this, and and then you have a moment, where do I want to sit? Where would I like to sit? And then your mind chooses, and then it tells your brain to propel you in a certain direction to the seat, and it sits you down. Now we say that that's operated by the brain. Okay, the brain has a role in that activity. Tibetan Buddhism says it's operated by the mind, by the consciousness dictating to the brain how to function. So if you're seated where you are right now, just think about what took to get you into that position. To turn you around, to sit you down, okay? And then back yourself up. Okay, so just close your eyes for a moment, and I'd like you to recollect when you were in your seat, the end result, and I'd like you to just back yourself up, activity-wise, to when you stood in the doorway and entered the doorway. So what I want you to reflect on now are, number one, the activities that got you into the seat. And just trace back all those activities, which includes the movement of muscles that move your limbs. So the limbs move because muscles moved. The muscles move because there were synapses of nerves. Those move because there was activity from the brain dictating that to happen, that comes from thoughts. Where do the thoughts come from? So again, take yourself from the activity in the chair back to the doorway. Just go back through it one more time. Can you see a continuity there, a continual, a connection, one activity to the one before it, causing it, to the one before it, causing it, to the one before it, causing it. And stand at the doorway. When you get back to the doorway, stand there for a moment. And reflect on what's happening in your mind at that moment, standing at the doorway, taking in the room. And do you notice some thoughts in your mind at that moment? Can you just recall some thoughts in your mind? And just take one of those thoughts now. Where does that thought come from? Okay, open your eyes. Where did the thought come from? What's your observation? Did you have a thought of, at the doorway, oh, I'm going to sit over there? Could that have been one of the thoughts?
Yeah. Yes, out of habit.
Like that?
Yeah. Because I normally sit here, so I just said, okay, that's where I'm going to go because that's where I normally sit.
Okay, great.
Yeah, in fact,
Oh.
if it's the first time, it's a different thing. If it's the second, the memory affect your thoughts anyway. But the first
Okay,
time,
on that.
the first time is something that you have inside before, because you see the place and somehow you find the one that you like better for some reason that you don't know before, obviously.
Right, okay. So what happens is there is this thought process that's happening all the time for us, and we are taught to some degree that the thoughts come from our brain. Okay? Tibetan Buddhism has a different system, and it says that it actually compels the brain to think. And so basically it's first the mind and the consciousness that come in contact with your physical form, okay, that allow that form to function, and it takes you through your life. This is the mind in Tibetan Buddhism. No beginning and no end, and the reason is, if you just took yourself from the seat back to the doorway, okay, I was trying to also get you to see that each activity has a preceding moment of activity that caused it, that caused the next moment. Could some people see that?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
You know, you didn't just pop into the chair. There's a moment where your body was positioned to sit in the chair. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
Okay? And before that, there was a moment that you came up to the chair. Okay? And that was caused by your being in a position to walk to the chair, caused by a previous position of on your way to walking to the chair, preceded by another moment that caused it of selecting to move to that chair. Does everybody see that? The connection? So in Tibetan Buddhism says that every moment of consciousness that allows those activities to happen, every moment of consciousness has a preceding moment that causes it. A preceding moment that causes it. Okay, nothing comes about randomly in Tibetan Buddhism. There's always a preceding cause for something to happen. Whether it is an activity of your body, whether it's something in your speech, or whether it's a thought in your mind. There will always be a preceding moment of consciousness. Those moments of consciousness or moments of mind make up your thoughts. And each one is preceded by a moment that causes it. So there's a cause and effect relationship to everything. Karma, cause and result, action. Okay, action that creates future results. So this particular moment of consciousness, my present moment of consciousness, you could say, is a result of the previous moment. And this present moment is now the cause of the next moment. And the next moment is a result, the resulting moment of the previous moment. So they're just trying to show you in Tibetan Buddhism, and that's basically what I'm teaching from Tibetan Buddhism, Buddhist perspective, is every moment of consciousness has a preceding moment that caused it, and every moment is a result of a preceding moment. So there's no beginning, there's no end to the mind or the consciousness. It's a continuum without beginning or end. So I want you to just reflect on that this week or until our next class. But it's one of the most important parts of Tibetan Buddhism about this beginningless nature of the mind, and the mind is immaterial, without form, shape, color, things like that. And that's very hard for us to conceive of. Okay? But when you really want to think about reincarnation, because if you go back right now in mind, and you think, well, a lot of people get to this point, okay, I can understand my activities being propelled by thoughts and things that are coming from the mind. That makes sense. but there has to be a first moment. Because we're linear thinkers, linear livers, we need to know that there's a first moment. And people say, I think that the first moment of my mind, some people say to me, the first moment of my mind was when I was born. And other people have said to me, the first moment of my mind was my conception. So people usually end up in those spaces. Okay. But if you notice, and this is through the more formal, deeper meditation on the continuum of consciousness that you can find online through our online courses, the continuum of consciousness, you spend a little bit more time in meditation, taking yourself back through very brief periods of your life, like a present moment now, how did you get to your seat? And you might swing back through something, a 5-minute moment in the last month of your life, and you notice how that moment was preceded by another moment that caused it, another moment that caused it, another moment that caused it. I may take people back in the meditation to their earliest memory, when they're a child, their earliest memory, and they remember a little moment, and they go, yeah, that moment was the end of that little incident, and that was caused by a preceding moment, a preceding moment, a preceding moment. Okay, so then what if you go back to what you can't remember? Being inside your mother, let's say. Being inside your mother. So if all these other moments in my life, I could trace that there was a preceding moment of consciousness that created the next moment, there was a preceding, there was a connection. Is it possible that when you're developing inside your mother, the consciousness was there taking you through your development? You know, one moment preceding the next, causing the next moment, and that moment preceded by another moment that caused it, preceded by another moment that caused it, like that. Is everybody following?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit?
No, yes, perfectly.
Okay, it's very heady, it's something to think about, okay? So what people often say to me, because some people don't believe in reincarnation. I didn't believe in reincarnation when I came in contact with Buddhism, okay? So people want proof of reincarnation. I understand that. People want proof. I want to know what I was in the past, okay? Well, what is the proof, I ask people, that reincarnation doesn't exist? Do we have proof that there's nothing before us? Nothing came before this life? Are you sure about that? There's no proof of that? So people say, well, I don't remember, so it didn't happen. I don't remember, so it didn't happen. So I ask you, do you remember being inside your mother? Anybody in the room?
No.
Right? Generally, most people don't remember being inside their mother. Did that not happen? Right? So it really gave me something to think about. Because I don't remember being inside my mother, but there's photos where people say that was you. Okay, so then I started to think about it, and I realized in tracing my activities, there was a connection. Like, activities didn't just come about on their own. There was a moment, and there was actually bodily functions, muscles moving, nerves interacting, which I knew came from the brain. I thought came from the brain. But I realized there were thoughts in there as well. And I couldn't figure out where the thoughts come from. And it seemed like the thoughts came from previous thoughts. And those thoughts came from other thoughts. So there's this whole stream of these ever-flowing thoughts in your mind. So is it possible that they're also streaming back into my development as a fetus, if they exist in the rest of my life? What do you think? Do you think that's a possibility?
Yes.
I've stumped the four people in the back row.
Yeah. No,
No,
I totally agree. I will let you finish, and then I have my question anyway.
Okay,
If
sure.
you want, whenever
So
you
what
want.
say before I take the question is, so if you actually want to wind back and you feel that there is a stream of something happening in the mind, what Tibetan Buddhism will label it moments of mind or moments of consciousness, You can take yourself all the way back to conception. And Tibetan Buddhism would say that conception is when the sperm and egg came together and the sperm fertilizes the egg. Sperm and egg are physical. Is everybody in agreement with that? Sperm and egg are physical. And that creates your body because physical things create other physical things. But physical things cannot create non-physical things like the mind. And the mind, being non-physical, doesn't create physical things. Okay? It can help some of those things come about, but it doesn't directly create them. Okay? So for some reason, the sperm and egg create my body, absolutely, and it can be proven. And that's the beginning of your body. Okay? So how does the mind get connected to that?
Yeah,
Where does my mind come in? If it's Tibetan Buddhism says your mind is not your brain. The mind is not the brain because the brain is physical. And Tibetan Buddhism says the mind has this unique ability, and the mind exists like the body, on a gross level, like a blatant level that we can trace, on a subtle level, and on a most subtle level. And it has this unique ability in its most subtle form, in its clear, light nature, to attach itself to the body in its most subtle form, which is a most subtle wind energy that creates the body. And they ride along with each other, completely distinct entities, okay, but inseparable. So most subtle mind mounted like a rider on a horse on the most subtle wind. And Tibetan Buddhism says that most subtle mind is there at the moment of conception. And it is that most subtle mind that dictates how that body is going to form and how that life is going to be. All dictated by the imprints in that consciousness. Where does the consciousness come from? If all these other moments streamed together had preceding moments that caused them, is it not possible that that first moment of the most subtle mind that is there at conception had a preceding moment? So the moment of mind that's there at conception, is it possible for it to have a preceding moment that caused it? And where would that preceding moment of mind be then, if it's not in your current, present life? Something to think about. So please, your question.
I believe in reincarnation. One of the things that I appreciate more about Buddhism is because it's also the more in tune with science. The problem that I have is with the beginningless mind, because I still believe in the Big Bang, and so my problem is to go before the Big Bang, the mind, where it, or all the minds, or probably it's too scientific question, but this is my problem that I have with the...
No, that's a great question, a great thing to think about. So what I think about sometimes, many of you have done this where you're in a very natural space outside that's dark, without a lot, not near a city. And sometimes you look up into the sky and you see this endless kind of Milky Way stars, it's overwhelming, okay? So the fact that our planet and our galaxy exists, okay? Now, isn't it interesting that every so many years, every 10 years, 20 years, scientists discover some new planet, or they find a new moon for one of the planets, or they find this other, something has arisen that they didn't know about before, okay? So it gives me some indication that there's this limitless quality to the universe, the cosmos. And what happens a lot of times is I think our limited understanding likes to place limitations on things. This is as much as we can conceive. And I think of when I read about the ancient scientists and the astronomers, and at one point they thought the Earth was flat, correct? And they thought that the Earth was the center of the galaxy. And they, and you saw how things evolved. And slowly, suddenly they realized, no, the Earth is actually round, and actually it's the Earth that orbits the sun. And then, so when I think of the Big Bang, it's given me, over the years, my own understanding is, I just believe it's one Big Bang among many, many Big Bangs. And it's a Big Bang that happened to start our galaxy going. But couldn't our galaxy be one of many, many galaxies and one of different transformations and things like that? What do you think?
Yes, in some way, this is maybe even easier than, and now I'm talking more about evolution than astronomy than Buddhism, perhaps. But what about before the human, we came from the sea and we were fish, and so, well, in fact, mind is also for animals, so yeah,
Even
also,
the little microorganism.
yes, has a mind, yeah, no.
Yeah. So Tibetan Buddhism takes the mind down to a single cell organism, an amoeba. Tibetan Buddhism would say an amoeba has mind.
Yeah.
And again, I'm just giving you Tibetan Buddhist perspective. You can certainly debate, no problem at all.
No,
They would say, sorry.
I agree, no, with it. In fact,
Okay.
for the second part, the evolution, I have the answer. I still believe too much in the Big Bang to think that there were more Big Bang, but this is the last 0.0001% of doubt or meditation that I have to do.
That's good. No, I think it's fantastic to be discerning. And I usually ask people to please check up on what I'm saying and investigate.
Yeah.
And I liked when Violetta was saying she researches. Fantastic. It's a perfect way to approach the teachings. You want to check up, you want to investigate. Please research, please investigate. So for me, scientists that have come up with the Big Bang, for me, unless they have an omniscient mind, meaning all-knowing mind, like the Buddha, okay? And you don't have to be a Buddhist to have an all-knowing mind. But I'm just saying that's one example, okay? So for me, a lot of scientists have limitations. And when I mentioned some of the ancient ones, they had theories that everybody believed at one point, and then the theories were disproved. So when I was a child, for instance, my understanding of the smallest molecular frame, the smallest molecular particle, when I was a kid, my memory is it was called an atom.
Yeah.
And then as we've gone through time, now there became a quark. And then there was some nano something, and now it's even smaller. And one of my nun friends who founded the San Francisco, California Center with me, Venerable Carol, she was a mechanical engineer working at a laboratory in Berkeley that built accelerators to break down molecules. Can you imagine, as a nun? She did this as a nun. And she used her money to support the center, right? And Rinpoche came in and visited us and stayed with us in her home in the middle of San Francisco. So again, she designed machinery, accelerators, that broke down molecules for more research and experimentation. And if you read some of Einstein's writings, he talks about this ability to continue to break down matter, to continue to break it down until, and what he came to, he seemed to know about emptiness. He didn't label it that, but he seemed to come to this conclusion that you will continually break down matter. It has an ability to continually be broken down. Why? Because fundamentally, there doesn't exist anything there. It's always further broken down. There's nothing concretely existing there. So it very much aligns with Buddhism, but when I think of scientists in my realm, of my generation, first saying the atom, that's it, that's the smallest thing, and now they have something else, this Big Bang is like, how are we sure that that's the beginning of, it certainly is the beginning of our galaxy. That seems to be proven. But to say we're the only galaxy out there, sometimes it seems a bit pompous to me, that we think we're the only ones there. And so it's just something that I've come through my own study and things of how there could have been thought and evolution and things like that. So if you say we came, in this one belief system, we came from animals, and before we were lemurs, we came from the sea and things. So is it possible that that form that we were also evolved from other matter? But the mind being immaterial doesn't only have to just be in that certain form. And the mind can continue to exist, still attached to another type of form. They could have been minute particles, something like that, in another space, in another form.
Yeah, but
moving with another form like that.
In fact, if you go back, there was the beginning at the beginning less time, because life never started. So you go back, even the fish, even before the Big Bang, there was already the seeds
Yes.
of the life.
That's right.
In the small atom that became the Big Bang. So there was already some consciousness and some life there. So you have solved my problem.
I'll put it this way. It is something to think about, because what I've also noticed, I notice it in my own mind, but I've noticed it just in general in the world, as you notice it as well, is the ordinary mind has severe limitation to it. Would you agree?
Yes.
The ordinary mind is phenomenally limited. It's also phenomenally glorious because it can develop into a fully omniscient, fully realized mind, a being like that. But when it's ordinary, it has a lot of limitations that get us into trouble and cause us to suffer. So when I think about my own limitations, then I think about other concepts that are out there. And I like to be discerning, like if I'm looking at a news story on the TV, if I'm reading a book and reading something in the newspaper or magazine, right, I'm often questioning who wrote the story. Is there a bias? Where does it come from? Where does it, because everything's coming from, for the most part, on our planet, that kind of limited consciousness, unless the person is highly realized for a Buddha. And it seems a lot of times on our planet that we're not experiencing a lot of highly realized consciousness. We're experiencing more ordinary consciousness, the people around us. And so a lot of times that's what I think of, those limitations of the Big Bang and this sort of thing, is it comes from, people not being able to conceive of something a little bit extraordinary that could be there. So I often think about that when I think of other things in Buddhism I've been able to have more faith in. Then I think, well, maybe there could be this connection to the mind, that previous imprints causing another imprint, like that. And sometimes I even look at your own children, so those of you that have children, or you have siblings, like that. And when I see how different I am from my siblings, when I see how different their kids are, even though they're close in age, from the same parents, I think, where did they get those imprints? Why is one like this and the other one is like that? And some of those imprints don't come from their parents. Those imprints, they have some other traits that neither parent is like that. So where does it come from? Where does it come from? And then if people say, well, I think it came from God, God made it happen. Okay. Then we have to explore a notion of God. What do you mean by God? So the Judeo-Christian God that I was raised with was, and labeled like this, please correct me if I'm wrong, omnipotent. He was a he, okay.
Yeah.
Also omnipotent, okay. And the words that I was used, the way I was raised, he was omnipotent, meaning all powerful. He was all powerful. I never heard the word omniscient, all knowing. He was all powerful. Now, someone in my consciousness, my understanding of power, if there's something omnipotent and all powerful, that person could do anything in the world. Would you agree?
Yes.
If you're all powerful, couldn't you stop cancer from manifesting? Couldn't you stop a building from falling down on people's heads in an earthquake? Couldn't you race across a planet and stop that from happening? Or, couldn't you put wildfires out and stop a hurricane from coming? I mean, that's my idea of all powerful. So I started thinking like, I don't know what kind of power that is if you can't do those things. And so, so then I started, a little bit questioning that concept, that these ideas, these kind of traits that your kid has that's different from the traits you have, different from the traits your other kids have, then God created it. Okay? So Buddhism doesn't have a notion of a God, the creator, because Buddhism puts your mind in the creation seat. Everything, and it says everything comes from your mind. And that's very revolutionary for us. Coming from the cultures we came from, everything comes from your mind. And here's a way that I also analyze this a little bit, and I do this even daily, is everything comes from the mind. So you go, well, how is that possible? Really? So I checked up, and one of the times I was checking up, I was a new Buddhist, but I made my way back to India. So first I came in contact with Buddhism in Nepal. Then I went back to my country, came back to the States. And a couple of years, I got a job, and I was with my family, and I had a job for a few years, saved some money. And about 2.5 years later, I went to India. And I was on a train in India. And some of you have been on Indian trains. And so I was on a train in India, and it was a compartment with 6 of us in the compartment. And there were 4 Indians and me and a British woman. Okay? The British woman, I didn't know her. But it was an overnight train, so it was a long journey. It was like, 10, 12 hours journey, and we were going to sleep on the train. When we got on the train, she was miserable. She was just complaining about everything. And I was at first kind of eager to see a Western person to spend the time with, but when she started complaining all the time, I was a bit more concerned. She wasn't very pleasant to be around. And the Indian people were really nice, but they didn't know a lot of English, but we were kind of hanging out, and she complained about everything, very miserable. And I could see that the Indian people were picking up on her agitated energy and were uncomfortable with it as well. And then I got a little embarrassed being a Westerner and this woman. Okay, so we went along, but everything was a problem. So on Indian trains, if you're in an upper class train thing, I really like it because they deliver food to you on the train. They take your order and they deliver the food. Dinner, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Now, I just took a train to Vermont, and I was on the train for 9 hours. No one delivered any food to me on the train. Okay, Amtrak, right? They don't. You have to go to the cafe car. And then they don't have very good food. But the Indian trains, you get a hot meal, and anyway. So the food comes. She orders the food comes. She complains about the food relentlessly. I'm having the same food she's having. I'm not having a problem with the food. I'm finding the food quite nice. Okay. Anyway, we go to sleep, but the whole thing is the bed's uncomfortable, the seat's uncomfortable, it's too noisy, it's too crowded. That's all that comes out of her mouth. Okay. So there's me and my mind. But I'm having a completely different experience on the train. I actually find sometimes Indian trains endearing. And I like my meditation on the train. And okay, we're having a different experience. So we wake up in the morning, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe she was really tired, and now it's morning, We're going to get some sleep. Wake up, and I also love it because they used to bring you this cute little flask, little plastic thing of hot tea or milk or coffee. And it's the real sweet milk tea and milk coffee the way my grandmother used to make it. So I was kind of looking forward to my flask, and they take your order, and then they're going to bring you breakfast. They bring you an omelet, and it's very nice. Nothing fancy, but it's quite nice. And we're all there, and the Indian family and I are having a nice time and talking, and the sun is rising now. Anyway, the coffee comes, and she immediately, the woman says, the English woman, coffee's cold. My little thermos is cracked. And the omelet, anyway, whatever it is, she's the same. She's miserable. So then the sun is rising outside the window, and when you're on these trains overnight and you look out over the Indian plains, sometimes there's nothing more beautiful when the sun is rising and the water buffalo you see in the fields and the little thatched houses and the little villages. It's really magic. Okay, it's really magic if your mind is in a certain space. Okay? And so finally I see me and the 4 Indian people in our compartment are all looking out the window at the sunset. And we're all at the sunrise. And there's nothing more you can say about it, I thought, other than it's beautiful. It's really beautiful. We're looking, and I see we're all smiling at each other. Like we're having a moment together. Very nice moment. And I thought, this is going to get this English woman. This will melt her. There's nothing negative you could say about this. It's not possible, I think. And she's looking in her bag, rummaging through her bag, and I tap her on the knee. She's sitting across from me, and I gesture with my hand. And I said, the sun is rising, thinking that would get her. And she looks out the window. I see she looks out for a while. And then she turns and she says, the window is full of scratches. Okay, seriously. So I was checking, and I was a new Buddhist student, and for me it was so blatant, it's so apparent. Your reality comes from your mind. It comes from your mind. You could say God created both of us. Why is she having a bad experience? Why was everything negative? It's just your attitude. We're in the same train, and then she starts blaming India. It's India. I hate this country. Well, it wasn't India, because I'm in India, and I'm loving India, and I'm having a great experience in India. So the more I started to think about this, you see colleagues, co-workers you have people in your community, people at your church if you go to church, people at your kids' school, right? Some of them flow with stuff and tend to have a pretty good attitude and be pretty spacious. Other people, not at all. Okay? Is God doing it to them? Is God doing it to anybody? Because you're on the same planet then with the same God, and or could it be your attitude or your mind? So it's really got me thinking. Something to think about. Okay, let me go to this next thing because I know we're going to quickly run out of time. So I want you to continue to think about the mind. There is, if you like, a meditation I mentioned on the continuum of consciousness that I can send around. If you'd like, I can email that to you if people would like to try that. You can just read the page, read through it, pause when you like. It's very helpful. There's another meditation called the clarity of consciousness, and I can send those around. I'll make a little note and send those around for you. Okay.
Venerable, can
Yes.
I ask something really quick
Yep.
about the mind and the continuity of mind? I usually I don't go back because when I think about it, I go back and back and back and back, and I can't find. But then when I go, what's going to happen next and death, the continuity of mind and how it's formless, and that when it attaches to a body, then I can see it. But in between, where is the mind in between?
Yeah.
And what happens? Is it a moment of attachment that brings to that sperm and that egg? What is it that brings that mind, and what happens in between those 1 day or 2 or 3 or how many days or 7
Okay.
days?
So this is what Tibetan Buddhism says about the process of getting out of one body into another form.
Mhm.
Okay. What Tibetan Buddhism says is because the consciousness has an ability, creates a cause for the next moment of consciousness, there will also be a future rebirth, future time evolving, going on. Because every moment right now, this present moment we're thinking, is creating a result in the future, is creating another moment of consciousness, another moment. Eventually you die, and the form passes away. The body can only be sustained so long. Okay, and you can meditate on that as well, and realize, well, everybody does die, the body does die. I mean, just look at your own aging process, you see changes. Okay, so eventually the body can no longer sustain. And what happens is the body, which is, again, the body also exists like the mind in a gross form, which is this. This is the gross form of the body, something you can see and touch, like that. It has subtle form, and it has a most subtle form. Okay? The subtle form, we're not used to, it's subtle. So you don't catch what's going on in the subtle body. There's some subtle things happening in our bodies right now. For instance, blood is circulating through your body. Your heart is beating. There's neurological impulses. There may be digestive activity. Cells are replicating. Okay, things like that. Are you aware of many of those processes? Probably not, right? Okay, so that's a more subtle level that the body's operating on. Okay. The other thing is that there's subtle winds in the body that support the body functioning. Subtle winds are physical in nature. For instance, this is a gross wind, okay? Gross wind means it's something you can see, hear, experience. A gross wind is my standard, even exaggerated respiration. Gross wind, okay? Subtle wind is, there's subtle winds that are moving up in the body, upward moving subtle winds, downward voiding subtle winds, okay? And what they do is they help my body move and support my body. So upward moving subtle winds, again, they're subtle, so I'm not really noticing the winds, but upward moving subtle winds allow me to speak, chew food, swallow, cry, turn my head, like that. All because of upward moving subtle winds. Downward voiding subtle winds allow me to walk, sit down, go to the bathroom, digest food, have sexual orgasm. Downward voiding subtle winds. Okay, again, I don't experience the wind, but I certainly experience the grosser level of the body after it's propelled by the subtle winds. Okay, so the reason your eyesight changes as you get older is because upward moving subtle winds that support the sense consciousness, which is from the mind of eyesight, that connects with the organ, the physical organ, the eye, that starts degenerating. And most people I know as they're aging, their eyesight starts to weaken. That's why your hair turns gray or white, because the subtle winds that create the hair color and allow that hair color to have a certain color starts to degenerate. All physical in matter, all physical in form. Okay, so what happens is you are left finally with the most subtle wind. The most subtle wind resides in the heart center, not in the organ, the heart, but in a subtle energy system in the center of a heart chakra. Chakra means wheel. That's around the heart organ, in the middle of a central channel, heart chakra. In the center of that chakra, that wheel, is an indestructible drop that contains the most subtle wind, okay, this kind of energy force, a life force, that I'll talk about in other terms. In the Chinese system, it's called qi. In the Hindu Ayurvedic system, it's called prana. In the Tibetan system, it's called lung, wind. And that most subtle wind supports the most subtle mind, like a rider on a horse. So when you die, and all the absorptions of these winds have taken place, and there's various internal visions that appear to your mind, okay, that then the indestructible drop opens, okay, and the most subtle wind leaves. There's nothing more to support it of that form, of that body, and it dissolves. And it goes off into an in-between state, but at that point the wind dissolves and you're much more, in a sense, this mind, this bardo being, which is more mind than a form. It has a very, very subtle form as what's called a bardo being. And bardo simply is a Sanskrit word that means in between, because you're in between two forms, two lives. Tibetan Buddhist system says you have up to 49 days to ride through that bardo, to basically transcend and travel through this in-between state. As an ordinary being, you're propelled in the in-between state, uncontrollably propelled, and whatever imprints are in that consciousness are propelling you uncontrollably to find the next rebirth. And then absolutely at 49 days, they say if you're taking a human rebirth, the being, the bardo being, which is much more mind at that point than body, but it's a subtle body, okay? That being will be more attracted, if it's going to be a female, take birth as a female, it will be more attracted if there's a male that's making love or having sex. You know, the ability to create life at that point, to create a new life form. So it may be more attracted to see the male in that, and it would then come in, take rebirth as a female. If you're taking rebirth as a male, you'd be much more attracted to the female in the inner relation and coming back as a male. What happens with tattoo babies? I don't know how the mind gets in there, you know, how the mind would be attracted to come in at that point, but there's some sort of physical basis, most subtle wind, and along riding with that is this most subtle mind. Inseparable but distinct. Inseparable but different. One is form, one is material, the wind, one immaterial, the mind.
And awareness is happening there somehow. There's moments of awareness there.
Yes. Tibetan Buddhism would say yes.
Okay.
Now what happens is, it's much more subtle. And I think because sometimes it's much more subtle is why in our gross consciousness as ordinary beings we don't remember those instances. What also happens, when you fall asleep every night, the inner visions that happen to you when you're dying happen to you when you're falling asleep. But because they're more subtle, and because our minds are not as familiar with those visions, why? Because we don't do them in meditation every day. So as a result, you miss those visions that happen every night until your mind goes into a more clear light state, a very, very subtle state. And when you come out of it in the morning, those visions reverse as you wake up. But again, they're too subtle, so we don't notice them.
Okay. Just to be clear.
Does that help?
Yes, the subtle form of the wind. That's what I want. Okay. I see.
The subtle form.
The subtle form is the wind that is
Yes.
with the mind because it's inseparable, pretty much.
It's inseparable. They're
Okay.
inseparable.
Okay.
But they're distinct entities, different.
Okay.
One being based in form and matter, and one being no form, no matter, like that.
So,
And again, both of them existing on a gross level, a subtle level, and a most subtle level.
so a Buddha has a subtle form.
Yes, a Buddha would still have a gross, subtle, and a most subtle form and mind.
Okay.
Yes, every being.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
Great.
guys.
So let me talk a little bit about, let me just move on to a slightly different thing. And we can always have more questions about the mind and review this next time as well. I want to talk about the 4 seals of Buddhism. The 4 seals of Buddhism. Okay? And one of the things I want to talk about is this is, in a sense, what makes you a Buddhist. But there's one main thing that would constitute you being a Buddhist that relates to the 4 seals. But I just want to think about when you think of someone who's a Buddhist, and you yourself may identify as a Buddhist, what would you say makes it distinct that you are a Buddhist? What would be something that makes you a Buddhist? This is what defines me as a Buddhist. Any ideas?
Compassion.
Compassion, for sure. People always say compassion. Compassion.
What a Buddhist should be, or all the Buddhists that we have met, because there are many different Buddhists that I've met also. I don't know.
Well, I would say rather than what should be,
what it should be.
but that's, rather than what should be is, when you think of a Buddhist, what are they doing that could be different than other people on the planet?
Meditation.
Kinder.
The study.
Most of the people are kind.
The study
Kind.
of Buddha.
Kinder.
Okay, so related to meditation, what does meditation allow you to do?
Analyze
What's the
your
point of
mind.
meditation?
To calm your
Calm.
mind.
Peace.
Yeah.
And what about the mind?
To calm your mind.
To calm your
To
mind?
stop your mind.
And what else does it help you do with your mind?
Develop it.
Develop your mind?
Familiarize.
Analyze it.
Analyze mind? Yeah. Okay, so what really makes you distinct as a Buddhist is that, I'm going to use these 2 words, you become an inner being.
Mhm.
You're an inner being. Because what Buddhists do is when stuff happens, whatever is evolving in their life, whatever is occurring, okay, you're checking your mind. You're checking your mind. That's what really being a Buddhist is about. I'm analyzing, like you said. I'm developing my mind. I'm checking my mind. Like Anna Paula was saying earlier, she's watching her mind. That's a Buddhist.
Yeah.
Is watching your mind. You're an inner being. Every time, if you're unhappy one day, okay, you're not blaming outside of yourself, like the woman on the train. Okay? You're actually saying, well, I wonder why I'm so miserable right now. What's going on? What's causing that? You know, what kind of inner cause is making that happen? You know, you're very happy one day. You go, what kind of inner cause is creating that? Can I create more of that? Okay, inner being. That's the real key about being a Buddhist. And then what we do is we sometimes use that inner beingness through the 4 seals of Buddhism. So let me talk about the 4 seals. I know you've all heard, some of you have heard these before. 4 seals of Buddhism. Okay. Number 1, all compounded phenomena are impermanent. All compounded phenomena are impermanent. Everything changes. That's our reality. So you would be an adherent, meaning as a Buddhist, I would agree with that everything changes. Compounded means all the things we look around us are products of something else. And all of it's impermanent, right? And this is a nice exercise to do this week. It's just notice the changing nature of things. Notice the changing nature. So today I went to the doctor. Okay, it wasn't a major thing. They have a clinic that also does osteopathic manipulation. Okay? So I strained my back the other day putting my dad's wheelchair in the back of my car. Okay? So this guy's great, and I really love him. He's a wonderful doctor. And when I first went to the practice 2.5 years ago, they called it a residency program. And what it meant is you get a resident, not a full MD, but you get a resident who's on his way to being an MD. And then you get also an attending MD with you. So they sold me this practice and said, it's a really great practice because you technically get 4 eyes on you than 2. And first the resident talks with you and they're learning and training, and then the attending would come in and double check everything. So I was recommended to this practice. They have great doctors and I really like them, and for a year and a half, great, totally perfect. So the last year that I've been going, I rarely get an attending, and what I get is a resident, and I get med students. So something shifted, but nobody said anything to me about it. But they get these med students, and you get more of them, and the med students, it takes longer, and I don't really feel like being a guinea pig with all the med students. So I talked to the guy today, and I said, I just want to check. He said, you always have the prerogative to say you don't want the med students there. And so before I kind of said, well, if they can learn, it's okay, but today I didn't feel like having them there. And so he at first seemed a bit disappointed. So then we started talking, and I said, I explained when I got into this practice, this is what they told me it was about. But the last year, the attendings aren't there, and I get a resident, which is at one layer down, and now I get med students. And, so then he explained, and he said, oh yeah, I understand, you're right, things have changed, the programs change. And so things change. So as a Buddhist, I kind of said, oh yeah, okay, thank you, because things change, and I can adapt to the change and say no problem, and I do still like these doctors, or I can choose to go somewhere else. Like that, so things are always changing. So look at this week, and look at until our next class. How are things changing? How do you work with the changes? Do you flow with them, or are you resistant to the changes? Because again, number one, all compounded phenomena are impermanent. Okay, number two, 4 seals. Number 2, all contaminated things are unsatisfactory. All contaminated things are unsatisfactory. What this means is the nature of our reality. If you're coming into being as an ordinary being and you're not a Buddha, okay, you often experience reality as problematic. There's many limitations and problems, and as long as that exists, this kind of samsaric nature of things, samsara being a Sanskrit word meaning to cycle or to turn, turning through suffering, okay?
Venerable, wait.
Move through your weeks. Yep.
We got disconnected for 5 seconds or so.
Okay.
So you were
Sorry,
saying
can you just stop for a moment?
you stopped from samsaric existence of the cycling existence, and then that's we got disconnected.
Okay. So samsara again is a Sanskrit word to cycle or to turn. We're turning through suffering. And what you want to notice is as long as you're in samsara, which ordinary beings are, there's limitations, there's problems, and you'll never be satisfied. So one thing you can play with these next few weeks is noticing that unsatisfactory nature. And there's some acceptance we come to. I notice the unsatisfactory nature. Okay, I'm not going to be satisfied with it, but can it motivate me to practice and understand? And what will happen is, let's say, I'm just giving an example of the doctor today. I go in and I'm not satisfied having all the med students there. That doesn't so much work, but I understand that's a quality of samsara. So I'm not going to get angry at anybody. Why? Because I'm a Buddhist. So what a Buddhist means is I'm in that room watching my mind. I'm in there thinking, okay, well, these are human beings. These are nice people. They're all nice. Whether they're med students or residents, they're all really nice people trying to help me, all very focused on helping me, like that. So what's the problem? Or you could just say, I don't want these people here. Why are they here? You didn't tell me. And you can get angry and start blaming them. That's not being a Buddhist. You're not taking it inner to kind of see what's my mind, what has my mind created, what is my mind telling me, and how do I want to deal with this with my mind? Because it's coming from my mind. It's not coming from any other place. I know there's an outward manifestation, Tibetan Buddhism says, comes from the mind. Okay, number 3, of The third seal. All phenomena are empty, are selfless. So that is, and now layer it in the nature of reality, that everything lacks inherent, concrete, independent existence. Once again, everything lacks, it is absent of having inherent, concrete, independent existence. And the last is nirvana is peace. Nirvana is peace, meaning there's an end to the suffering. There's an end to the suffering. Nirvana is liberation, and nirvana is also a permanent cessation of all your mental afflictions. The four seals. Let me just see if I can also give you in a slightly different I just wanted to put them, sometimes I put them into different terms, slightly different ways you can, you might say about all contaminated phenomena are unsatisfactory. You could say on one level, all emotions are painful, is another way to look at the second seal. All emotions are painful. And see if there's anything else. Nirvana is peace. It's beyond extremes, you could say. Beyond extremes. Of overrelation and tremendous suffering. So those are the four seals that I wanted to mention that are part of this course that are helpful to look at. Let me just, yeah, that says it the same way. And let's see if there's anything else I wanted. There's some other things I was going to go through, but we are out of time, and we've covered most of this. I was going to do a little bit clarity of consciousness meditation, but we can do that at the next one. The next session, is the next session when I'm there?
Yes.
Okay, so then I'll be in person. Wonderful. So we have a little bit of a gap right now, okay? So what I'd like you to do, if it's possible, I know it won't be easy, but I'd love you to keep up some of the meditation things. What I'm going to do is send along these two meditations on the clarity of consciousness and the continuum of consciousness. I would love, please, if it's possible, to try to do one or both of them once a week until we meet. Just, 20 minutes, just read a bit of it, try to go through it, and just sit for 15 or 20 minutes with it. They're both very nice meditations. Clarity one is a little bit easier than the continuity of consciousness, but they're kind of neat for you to look at your mind. And then the next session, we start to move into the actual prayer, the foundation of all good qualities. And I want to talk about that. And we have copies we can read when I'm there in person?
Yes.
Great. We're going to read that prayer together when we meet in person. It's also really nice if, Anna Paula, I don't know can you make that available to people?
I send it. I send it out.
Oh, perfect. What I'd like you to do as a little homework, if you can, is to, in addition, is if you can, once or twice a week, if you want to read it every day, read the prayer, the foundation of all good qualities. It takes you through our entire philosophical path. So even if you don't understand it all, just read a little bit, make any notes of something you're not clear about. What does this word mean? What does that mean? It's a very nice taking you through the path just to get some familiarity. If you'd like to do that, that would be wonderful. Any questions before we close? Everyone doing okay?
Yes, perfect. Thanks to you.
Well, wonderful. I'm so glad you could join. I'd like to dedicate the merit now. If there's any positive energy we've created, I'd love to take that and invest it and fold it into our practices, helping us move along a path to full awakening, to becoming Buddhas so we can be free of the suffering and be completely unlimited in benefiting all living beings. I'd like to dedicate to the long lives and perfect health of our precious teachers, for the great flourishing of Namdrol Ling study group, and for all the beings on the planet who need additional healing, may they receive it immediately and completely. Gewadi Nuruda Lama Sange Jugune Jawachika Manuba Isalago Parjo Janchu Sencho Rinpoche Make Panam Ke Gurji Ke Panyam Pame Payam Gane Gandu Belwarjo. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for making the space. And I wish you a wonderful time. I'm trying to think if, no, I don't think I'm doing any more Skype or anything that you could tune in. I'm doing some local things and some things in New York. I know that the New York Center, I think maybe you're involved with them. I'm not sure, but apparently they're trying to stream Discovering Buddhism courses.
Okay.
And I heard that somehow they were the center that was going to stream to Boston and maybe to you guys as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the main thing would be to be in touch with them, because some of the classes I've been leading, and I'm not sure when that's starting, but if I'm around more with them, then we can all benefit from, all these things together. Like, that would be great.
Thank you very
Because,
much.
people are far, so we can hope that'll happen like that.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe we can do more of that in the future as well. So that can be really helpful for people that don't have a regular teacher around like that.
Yeah.
Like
So.
us.
Great.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you soon. And late January is right around the corner.
Yes.
And also I am leading a Nungne for the New York Center, and it's going to be Martin Luther King's weekend because it's a 3-day weekend. Now I know it's going to be cold up north, but if you have any interest in doing a Nungne, do contact them and you can join, and it would be really wonderful if some of you wanted to participate like that.
Could you please tell us what is a Nungne?
Yes. So a Nungne, thank you for, a Nungne is a 2.5-day fasting retreat that incorporates some beautiful practices, these sessions to the Buddha of compassion. So it is a rigorous practice. It's normally for at least some people that have had some Buddhist background. So if you're very, very new, I would encourage you to wait a little bit, but I know some of you would enjoy and would be at the level you could do. You're doing prostrations, you're fasting, no food or drink for 36 hours. So, you do have to have the health to do that. And we do these sessions reciting some mantras, doing visualization with the Buddha of compassion. It starts with an introduction on the Friday night of that weekend, which is around mid-January. And then we do full sessions Saturday and Sunday. Sunday is strict silence and fasting. But we do the sessions and we read the sessions together. And then we finish Monday morning at around 9 or 10 in the morning and have breakfast together. And we're doing it at Menla, which is Bob Thurman. He's a great scholar. He has a retreat center about an hour outside of New York.
Nice.
And they rented the place. I've never been there, but it's supposed to be very nice. And we're going to be there together. And so it's something you can think about. I believe the New York Center may have something now on their website. And you could read more about it if you're not quite ready, just at least you get some idea. It's a deep purification practice. So maybe something for the future. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Venerable.
Okay, enjoy.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.